Come join us as we go behind the scenes of today's most notorious cybercrime. Every time we get online, we enter their world. So we provide true storytelling to raise awareness, interviewing global leaders making an impact and improving our world, translating cybersecurity into everyday language that's practical and easy to understand. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast by downloading our episodes on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. Well, that wraps this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our episode. The next one is coming right up. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast and downloading on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for watching. All right, well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Mauro. I'm flying solo today. The Mark Mosher, my counterpart, and he is under the weather today. And he's got some, it looks like TMJ or something with his jaw, so we can't have him babbling and being in pain. That's not good. So our thoughts go out to Mark. I'm sure he'll be better soon. And I'm really excited about this discussion today. So, oftentimes we talk about, that internal communication and making the case, not only translating the complicated aspects of cybersecurity into business terms, but also the internal business case and making that case to leadership, stakeholders, whatever it might be. If it's a larger organization, clearly a board, investor groups, etc. But even in that SMB space, there's a lot of decisions being made, and there's a lot of internal business cases that we really struggle with in the cybersecurity industry to make. And somebody that I came across with that I've been following for a while, who's just brilliant in the field, and I encourage everybody to follow him on LinkedIn, is Rob Black. Rob, sir, welcome to the podcast.
Dean, great to be here.
Thanks for calling me Dean. I like that. There'll be more on that later, ladies and gentlemen. But my family's always called me that, and my friends do. My legal name is David Dean. So I invited Rob, since he's my friend, to always call me by my friend name. So that's good, man. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your current role. I mean, you have this company. It's like Fractional CISO, right? Walk us through it. Kind of what was the inception? Yeah. What was the inspiration to do it?
Sure. So going back to the starting point, I was working for the man 6-7 years ago, and helping companies with their cybersecurity programs, and thought every company is going to need this. Why don't I go out on my own? And this is going to be awesome. So I went out on my own in June of 2017. Thumbing my fingers on the desk, hoping for business to come.
Waiting for that phone to ring. I've done that before, man. That's why I'm working for the man. It's okay.
So I wasn't actually literally doing that. I actually was working the phones, meeting with people, having lunch, coffee, sending emails. And then by the end of 2017, wasn't necessarily paying the bills, but got 2 clients. So that was good. Just rewinding a little bit, my wife has been super supportive, and we kind of made a financial plan, and it wasn't like so much a surprise. Right. So we timed everything, and anyway.
Well, and that's the key, though. That is but that's so important, because we've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs, and they really talk about this is not a decision that could ever be made in a silo. right? This is not something we
For
just
sure.
explain that we're going to do over dinner as the male in the family. Like, kids, guess what? You're not going to private school. You're not doing this. You do that. Dad's going to go start a thing. So there's no vacations for the next three.
It's ramen noodles for
Yeah,
every
ramen.
meal
We're
from
back
now
to
on.
college days, kids. We are back to college days.
So she was super supportive and believed in me probably more than
It's
I did. And she
wonderful.
has I'd say, yeah, like a good job, steady paycheck, good benefits. So, I mean, all that helps. So, and also I would say, just for anyone who's thinking about starting a business, my risk profile, I perceive it to be different than a lot of other folks. So, if you're thinking about going on your own, just think about what your
Absolutely.
perceived risk
Well,
is. So,
because
yeah.
really, and I've done that in the past, but you have to balance two things. One is the long term goals, right? Like, I know I can get this one or two type profile clients eventually, but then the short term goals are what kill you, right? When you're first starting up, it's like, but every month you've got a nut to hit of some kind, right?
Yes.
And
No one's giving you that paycheck
right,
every other week. So that,
that's the
yeah, so
kicker.
you and yeah, I mean the other piece is just be prepared beforehand. Your business plan, your website, all those things can be designed and planned for and thought
Absolutely.
through. You can talk to a bunch of people beforehand, see does your idea resonate. So there's really, so anyway, so I would say definitely start before you
Yeah.
quit your job.
So so
Or at least
so
that's what worked for
and
me.
so the name of the company is Fractional CISO.
Fractional CISO. It's because I have a total lack of
I
imagination,
was
and I
like, you
said I'm going to be a
literally called
fractional
yourself. It's
CISO.
like plumber. Like, we are like plumber. Like, you drive by, it says
Now,
haircut. Like, that's us, man. You need that. That's us. I'm just
right. Well, so also just think back though to 2017 and beforehand. It wasn't so much of a thing as it is now.
correct.
So when I was doing sales pitches, 2016, 2017, 2018, people didn't get the
No, I
concept.
actually, honestly, I'm a
Um,
big branding guy. I study brands.
yeah,
I do a lot of market research, and I got to say, I love it. Like, I think it was actually at the
yeah,
time you launched it, it's actually very creative, believe it or not. Like, look, Got Milk. Got Milk was super creative. They don't even talk about the product, right? Like, they talked about the
right.
absence of the product, but it gets to that moment in time when you need it, right? And so the fractional CISO, it gets to the moment in time that people need it. The name is really good.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's definitely worked out well for us. I mean, obviously in search, it's good if someone's searching for fractional
Yeah, you're gonna
CISO,
come
they
up,
come up. We have way less explaining to do in the sales
right?
process,
If somebody
right? So I
calls in
mean,
a
all those
fractional
things are
CISO, they're like, "Do you do plumbing? What do you do?" Like, no, well, you know what we do. It's in the name. It's baked
right.
right in.
You got it. So that went really well, and then a couple years later, it was actually 13 months later I hired my first employee. I had a part-time admin beforehand. I hated
I
administrative
know, and
work.
that's a big
Yeah,
step. That
yeah. Well, the part-time admin, that's the easy one because it's not a huge commitment and you agree to a number of hours. Hiring a full-time employee though is a big step. So we got a space, had an employee, payroll, the whole 9 yards. So that was it. Fractional CISO was a thing by 13 months
That's
later.
that's wonderful. Well, that's fantastic. And we'll have
Um,
links to all of your content, your LinkedIn connection, but also I know you write quite a bit. You do a lot of public speaking, and we'll have a link right to Fractional CISO. And we do
awesome.
encourage
That's great.
everybody to check it out because, in my opinion, and the opinion of all the listeners, and it is something that every organization needs because they all know they like everybody we talk to in every industry, no matter what vertical, they have cybersecurity concerns. And they
For
don't
sure.
know what to do next. They don't know that roadmap, right? Like they don't
It's
know if
a
what they're
it's a
doing
tough
is
one.
enough. Is it not enough? Like, will they be breached? But if they get breached, what does it mean to them? Like, there's so many open questions that SMBs and even enterprise organizations have that we speak to regularly. It's really interesting.
Yeah. On the SMB side, the thing to me is, are you doing enough? The criteria to really think through is someone thinking about security at least every week? Is someone meeting let's say weekly? Is someone talking to the executive team about it monthly or quarterly? And if the answer is
Which
no,
it all
um,
almost all like
it,
a
it's
it's
often no.
often
I mean,
no.
basically,
That's the issue, right?
yes. Before we get into an organization, often the answer is no. It's We do sometimes take over a security program. Most of the time, we're starting it from ground
Hmm.
zero, and it's it's concerning because like, oh, we think we're doing a good job, but like it's some technical person's part-time job thinking about a couple of things, and depending on how much bandwidth they're allocating and how much they're thinking about it can make a huge difference in the organization.
Yeah. What Rob? What inspired you to get into cybersecurity originally?
Yep. So always loved computers and technical stuff. I mean, when I was 10 years old, my parents got me a computer, and it was just the best thing. And I became the director of IT in the black
For the
household
family, as
at
we all are, right?
for the for the
Yeah.
family, uh, and then I always wanted to do some sort of technical thing. I didn't know exactly what it was. Um, got a computer science degree, worked as a developer, other technical roles, and then went to business school, and then work was in the telecom space, maybe not the high growth space that it should be, and said, I want to switch
Hmm.
industries. Opportunity presented itself, and I got a job with RSA Security. I mean, I've always been interested in security. I'm kind of ultra paranoid, which is not always a good thing, but maybe if you're in security, it's a
We
good
like to
thing.
call it vigilance. Our
Yeah.
newsletter is called Vigilance. Like it is what we call it because I've been searching for a word that succinctly says it, and it's like be politely paranoid. Like just like trust but verify. And I'm trying to use all these acronyms and platitudes. I'm like vigilance. Like just do that thing and you'll be okay. And it's so
Yeah, I mean, I think my family might appreciate it if I was less
yeah,
vigilant
I
though,
know. I'm
because
the same
the
way,
things,
man. That's why
the
we're on
the
this
technology
podcast,
that
right? Yeah.
right, the technology that we don't use in our house is pretty stark to, I would say, most households. So
That's amazing. So, we often get the question, people, um, we've got three types of listeners to this podcast or viewers to our videos. And it's, either somebody is interested in following a certain leader, right? A certain global leader, FBI people, former hackers, whatever. They've got these cult followings, and we'd love to hear their stories. Like somebody like you, right? Love to hear the story. Then we also have the people that want to break into cybersecurity. Like they're in a position, they're really passionate about it. They don't know how to transition. And from any industry, that's in any industry going into another, that's always a scary jumping off point. And cybersecurity is very confusing for a lot of people. Like where to start? Like, oh, I didn't go to college for it. So what do I do? I have a business degree. It's like that doesn't matter. Like you can still do it. There's certain paths. Um, like
yeah,
what was one of the first things you did? Did you get a certification? I know now you have them, but did you get a
yeah.
certification off the bat? What did you do?
No, so in 2007, the landscape was super different. So, I mean, this doesn't necessarily, I actually do have a point, I think, for the folks that are transitioning, but um, it wasn't necessarily valid. RSA Security was just hiring for talent, not necessarily for cybersecurity knowledge, probably for certain roles they were. And so I just got a job as a product
Ah,
manager
got
there.
it. Okay.
And and then that kind of moved my path forward on the security journey. And then I was there for almost 5 years, and learned a ton of stuff while
Well,
I was
that
there.
that's a great
Um,
segue, isn't it? Because you can go work for somebody that's in the cybersecurity space in your similar role, in a business role, in a managerial role, in an operations role, a marketing role, etc. And by being there just through the ecosystem, you will learn so much. And then you can kind of evolve and decide, where do I want to be? Do I want to be in red teaming, blue teaming, management, sales, operations? There's so many things. Like if you think you're going to go from selling, uh, you know, widgets or certain products or medical devices into selling cybersecurity services or things. Like it doesn't work like that, right? Like you have to really be invested in the um, ecosystem of cybersecurity. Is that a fair statement?
Uh, for sure, and just as a data point, a majority of the marketing people, sales people, operations people that I know that were there, and maybe not manufacturing because we made a physical product, but the rest
Right.
of the folks, a majority of them are still in cybersecurity.
Exactly. Right.
And so and they've moved on. We had a RSA reunion a couple months ago, and almost everyone I chatted with was still in
I love
security
it.
or retired. I mean, it's yeah. So in general, I would say if you're looking to make a transition, work for a big security company and take whatever role, leverage your skill set to get a role there, and then make a lateral
Yeah.
move, do something to learn more about security. Uh, most of the time you're just going to learn a ton about security
Yeah.
just by being there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's exciting. And I don't mean you couldn't come from like medical sales or something like that into cybersecurity. I just mean what you should probably do is get into the organization and whatever skill set you have, get into the field, and then you'll learn so much in the field. Like just by being involved in it, you'll understand. And I just think it's a wonderful
Yeah.
industry. There's that greater calling, right? It's that calling to kind
I
of
mean,
serve and protect. You see a lot of people from the military, law enforcement. A lot of teachers have actually segued into it. A lot of teachers actually have segued that have met over to the FBI and then gotten into private sector. It's kind of interesting. Some of the trajectories that we've seen.
the so what's interesting to me on the example you gave on the selling into medical space, I would say if that was your skill set, if you're good at medical
Mhm.
sales, find a security company or just a company that has security products selling in the same
Right.
space, and you just need to learn the product. You already know the
Yeah.
space. So yeah, I mean, and in general, I would say work for a big security company if you're trying to make that transition. The smaller the company, probably the more specialized skills you're going to need. But who knows?
Right.
Maybe if you're in customer support and they need a customer support person, maybe that's a great place to
Absolutely.
learn.
Well, before we segue into the main topic that I want to uh, ask you about, and that's quantifying cybersecurity in the industry, because
Sure.
you've given several speeches on it, and I'm absolutely enthralled by it. We've had a lot of questions from people about it. Um, but before that, let me ask you: it, what is your take on the industry right now? I mean, I see so many startups, everybody's got AI in their name now, right? It's like a badge of honor. Um, but they all like some of the bold claims that I'm seeing from some of them are like frustrating some of the CISOs that we know, right? Like they have one layer and they do a really good job. Like it's a helpful layer, let's say that the offering is, but it doesn't mean social engineering is resolved. It doesn't mean that that network security is cured, right, by that one layer. What's your take on that?
So evidently they're using different AI technology than is available to me because every output, not every output, almost every output requires human tweaking
Right.
afterward. So, to me, the current LLMs are a tool like a calculator is.
Right.
So if you're doing a complex math problem, you take out the calculator, probably Excel
Right.
or whatever. But the point is you use a computer to solve the math problem, and then you use that output to
To do whatever
whatever
you're trying to
application it
do.
is.
Right.
For an LLM, it's the same sort of thing. If you're processing a whole bunch of data, you have it process the data, but then you say, okay, now the human that was doing this before, where it would have taken 3 hours, it now takes a half an hour because it's pre-processed. They can say, oh, that doesn't look right. You check this thing, and then you use it in conjunction with the
Right.
human. Now, it's possible that there are some things that don't require the human tweaking. I have not seen it. We've been playing, I would say, pretty extensively with a lot of different AI tools, and we're looking to actually use it as part of our services, but the quality is just not there today.
Correct.
And we're not going to put our name behind it. So these other companies, unless if they're doing a lot of engineering around it, or if it's a very scope problem, hard to believe that it's going to be working
Yeah, it
spectacularly.
still needs, I mean, we use AI almost every day in some facet, but it always needs human intervention, human tweaking, but
Right.
the processing, like I've just found it can be useful. Very, it's a good analogy. The calculator's a good analogy. Like I could get the pencil out and start doing all the calculations, or I could literally just use the
Right.
calculator, and that part will be done faster. And that component of it, we're kind of doing the same thing with AI, but you can't go
Yeah.
use AI
Yeah.
for, like it's good for me anyway. I found it's good for iterating. Like it's good for like I've got an idea. Give me some topics. What is the what is all of, like when you think about what it can pull from, like what are some of the top things or the top trends, and then from there you can get and go, oh, okay, that's a good idea. Let me dig down deeper. But then you still have to put your own human interface on
The
it.
the the best use case I've found is writing a job description. You
Yeah.
give it like this much text, it will generate a job description that's 80% of the
Yep.
way there. Then you tweak it. So many folks, when they're trying to create a job description, it's like impossible. It's like, oh, I have a blank piece of paper. I don't
Right.
know. Whatever the role is, say the role, some qualifications, put it in there, tweak it, and you have
Yeah,
a
because
job
it can pull
description.
from
That's
millions of samples and like give
right.
you some of the trends and some of the best practices. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one we've liked is writing up procedures. So oftentimes you might have some notes about a procedure. Put those notes in, give it a general direction. It gives you the procedure, then you tweak it some more. Things like that where you know what the output's supposed to look like. I think are the best uses of an LLM. The case where you're, I don't know, we've had some bad hallucinations that have really scared me
Hmm.
off
I've
on
seen I've
some of
seen
the
a
output.
bunch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's some of them were like kind of the key point, which is and it's like in my prompt we expressly said this is important, and anyway, we'll hopefully we'll make it more useful, but I would say in 2023 that's probably not the case, but who knows, by the end of 2024 maybe things will be way
Yeah.
better.
So in your role with fractional CISO, are you working with a certain segment of client? Is it the SMB space? Is it a particular industry? Anything?
Yeah, what we say is we work with medium-sized
Hmm.
clients. So medium for us is maybe 40 employees to 400
That's
employees, and it's a
exactly
little
the
loose. I mean,
space
some
that
of
we're
our
in. Yep. That's exactly. It's
yeah,
really not, when
and
you say SMB, then people are like, well, I have a 5-person company. Can you go? I'm like, no,
I
that's
have a
the
pizza
S
shop.
of SMB. We would have said
Right,
micro if we meant that, right? We might be a micro, but we're serving, that medium space. Yeah, because and to
right.
me, that's the bulk of the employers in the United States, at least. Like most people tend to
It's
work
it's a
for
lot of
those size
companies.
companies.
It's a lot of companies. If you think about any sort of, let's just imagine a 100-person company. You go to your insurance broker, or just all these companies, and they have 100 people. They're not going to hire a CISO full
No, they
time. I mean,
can't.
that would be
Right.
right. There's no way. But
But
yet
they need it.
they
But they
have
need it.
they have the same needs in some respects as larger companies, right? The attacks are coming to them. They're vulnerable. Their customer data is vulnerable. Their finances are vulnerable. So we focus on the mid part, and I would say majority of our customers are SaaS companies, software as a service. But I would say in general, the drivers really, I would say, technology use cases. So for instance, if you were a ball bearings manufacturer, unlikely that you'd be our customer. But if you were building some technical product, then maybe you might be a customer of ours. And it's basically has to do with the mid-sized company selling a large enterprise. The large enterprise says, "Hey, your security program is not good
Right.
enough."
That's exactly right.
So
So
that's
it's that BA, it's that business associates agreement, right? Like that contract that you have, right? To because of the risk of third party liability. When we think of, back in the day before data breaches were in the news every day, I always think of Target, right? Like when Target was
sure.
breached, it was such big news. Everybody was so surprised, and they were bashing Target. And I'm like, Target was. I mean, there was a couple things there. Uh, with how maybe they configured their FireEye at the time, but really it came in from the HVAC vendor, right? And it really
For
exposed
sure.
that need to actually start asking your vendors, right, all about what is your cybersecurity posture, and to have those requirements that you need by any vendor that wants to bid on your work.
The other thing is the PCI folks could have been doing a better job as well. So
Mhm.
I mean, if you
Oh
remember
yeah,
back, I mean, this is 10 years ago. No chips on the
right.
card. Just basically, you're swiping the card with, and that data is not being protected.
Well,
So,
and whenever we think
um,
of that too, we always get some pushback, and they're like, "Well, everybody keeps talking about, a devastating cyber attack is going to destroy a reputation, but Americans still shop at Target even post breach, right?" And it's
well,
like,
that's
but
it.
like, well, first, well, what do you, how do you reply to that? I'm interested in your thought.
Sure. So I think you want to think about reputation in two ways. So Target is a consumer brand that people shop at. Reputation is they're not a reputation vendor, right? You go to Target because you want to buy back to school stuff for your kids,
Right.
right? Or or whatever the thing is. A reputation kind of attack might be, if you think about like
A law firm.
a big four, a law firm, but like let's say a big four, big four
Yep.
for accounting, one of those big McKinsey, one of those big
Yep.
consulting companies, and so that would be a large financial institution. Those would be reputational type attacks. So for Target or Home Depot, you're probably not going to have that long-term reputational damage because it's not your core. Your core thing is, oh, we're great at cybersecurity. Your core thing
Right.
is, we're great at delivering cheap T-shirts that your kid can
Right.
wear. Um, the the other side though on Target, so if you look at their SEC filings, they had that attack was $300 million. It was a $300 million cost to them. Fortunately for them, they had cyber
Hmm.
insurance. Of course, their cyber insurance only covered $90 million.
Right.
So they wrote a check essentially for $210 million. Now, if you're Target, that works out totally
Hmm.
fine. But I'm guessing a majority of the folks that are listening on this podcast, that would not be totally fine for your business. Like, probably you're not quite as big, so it's not going to be the same sort of thing. But that attack can be devastating in the sense that it could totally put people out of business if something like that
Yeah,
happened. And
and you just brought up a really good point, and that is when we've talked to SMBs and we've talked to some owners that have been through massive ransomware attacks, and they talk about the emotionals, the emotional fallout from it that they didn't anticipate. They thought it was going to be
for
technical
sure,
in nature or financial or PR only, and it's like they didn't realize they had to go like that their entire their family life is tied to their small business, their mid-sized business,
right,
like all of their 5-year plan all of a sudden they saw evaporate, like all of these things. If they can't restore in time, they lose the trust of their customers, and Target can lose thousands of customers, like just people that are purchasing those t-shirts and things, and still be fine. Mid-sized businesses can't lose hundreds of clients, right? Like they can't, because then that's
right,
a bigger percentage of their overall revenue. So it's a huge challenge that the industry has. Well, what do
for sure.
so how do you address it? What are you seeing small businesses struggle with, medium businesses, as you call it, which I think
Yeah,
is very accurate. Well, what are
yeah.
some of the biggest challenges you're seeing them embrace? Do they not recognize the
So
cybersecurity threats necessarily?
well, the ones that hire us, certainly they,
Yeah,
I mean,
because they're all
they wouldn't, they're spending money. So, I mean, for sure, they're recognizing the threats, but, let's just say our starting point with a lot of them, our starting point is very basic. Sometimes I'm doing education even on, endpoint, antivirus,
Mhm.
EDR, maybe less so now, but a lot of Mac companies specifically, they've had a version to antivirus on their Macs, which, to me, that doesn't seem great. A lot of these companies, they may have contractors or even employees that are using their personal computer
Hmm.
for doing work stuff. And even if they allow you to put corporate controls on their personal computer, which probably is not going to happen. Second thing is when they leave the company, all of their documents are on their personal computer, and their teenager has access to it.
Right.
It's like, all those things are, so a lot of the advanced selling of tools is like all the sophisticated stuff, and we're like down here on sometimes super basic, right? So then there's the education piece, there's monitoring piece. It's very rare for any of our customers when they start with this. I mean, some of our customers are pretty sophisticated to start, but let's say 80% of them don't have any sort of monitoring in place when they sign with us. And and not to say that we're not going to get them there, but that's also not happening on day two because of all these other fundamental things that need to happen.
Right.
So now these are the customers that are hiring us for cybersecurity. Just imagine the ones that aren't seeing cybersecurity as an
Right.
important thing to spend money on. You can only imagine where they are and why, when one of these attacks happens, it's totally devastating for their business and might end
Yeah.
it.
Um, the effect of the pandemic and the influx of work from home. Um,
Yeah.
what is your feedback on how that uh, affected the medium business space in cybersecurity?
Yeah, well, certainly the endpoint became even more and more important. So protecting your corporate network has become less important for this size company. A lot of them don't necessarily even have one, or it's basically, let's say, a printer and their laptops
But
when
now
they're
the
there.
attack
But now
surface
all of a
got a lot
sudden,
bigger, didn't it?
yeah, now all of a sudden everyone's home
Right.
network is
And they're all
is a threat
secured
vector.
by that
So
crack Xfinity firewall that they give you, right?
so which is why you want to make that endpoint as hard as
Right.
possible. So you want to have MDM and an EDR on it. You want to make sure that encryption's turned on. You want to make sure that it's patched. All those things. Like that laptop is the edge of your network. Not only does it house the data, your customer data, and whatever access to your systems, but it's also at the very edge of your network, or outside of your network, really. So you want to really harden those laptops as best as possible. Um, and that one, I would say most customers are receptive up to a point. But then at some point it becomes like, okay, what's the return on investment on doing this
Right.
activity? And it's definitely harder to convince folks there because um, because they started from such a low baseline, and now it's like, wait, but look how much we've improved. So that's definitely a big change from everyone, or a lot of people working from home. The other bits with everything remote, I think, just changed philosophically on the importance of the network. So now I would say folks have rotated maybe even too much on it's just our corporate network. It's just like a coffee shop, and you're like, well, but you have like your cameras for your office. Well, sure, I have the cameras for the office building. You have your printers. Yeah, I mean, I have that. Well, how about that server closet over there? Well, we have a couple servers in there, and then
Exactly.
right, and then all of a sudden, like, maybe it is a teeny bit more important than you let on.
Right. It's exactly right. Yeah, it's there's a struggle oftentimes for them to know have a good asset inventory to actually know what all is actually on their network. You've got bringing your own device, you've got people using
Right.
personal devices all over the place. So,
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about, it's been in the news recently, and I'm just curious to get your take on what do you think the trend will be? We saw one of the ransomware cybercrime gangs, Alpha V, Black Hat. And now, granted, this is in
Mm.
the enterprise space now, but I don't foresee it always. And that is they not only launched ransomware, encrypted the data, made a ransom, threatened to publish the data, did the second, third layer of extortion, but then they went and they actually filed an SEC complaint against the
Sure.
victim for not reporting the data breach in time. And that's
Yeah.
big. That's a bold, brass move. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on what impact will that have on the SMB space. Like, I mean, if they're in a
Yeah.
regulated industry to some degree, if they are,
Right.
I'm curious if tactics like that would, if you think we might start seeing that.
So a couple things specifically. So the SEC part, there's some private equity piece, and then for the most part, it's publicly
Right.
traded, and they have a different rule for. I can't remember what they call small companies, but basically under 100 million publicly traded, slightly different rules. So the date actually, even for this attack, the date of implementation is December 18th, um,
Mm-hmm.
2023. So when they filed, it was actually in advance of that date. Now maybe they're just trying to get in the press first, so that way people are going to be terrified of them. Um, the for the under 100 million, the date is 6 months
Right.
later, so that's middle of 2024. So I do think there is a little bit more time to react if you're a publicly traded small company.
Good point.
uh, I yeah. How about this? Okay, great. Now you have an extra 6 months. I would. How about this? I would be, in general, do everything I can to prevent from getting ransomware, because never mind the SEC. I mean, think about your customers, your employees, your owners, your all your constituents. I mean, it's going to be devastating, most likely, if it's material. And then on the SEC front, I mean, it's potentially going to make something that's catastrophic even more catastrophic. Now the whole material bit, for some of these larger companies, is a ransom, let's say a segmented ransomware, is that material? I don't
Right.
know. Right, and is the data that critical? If you're GE and have you know tens of billions of dollars, and this is like one business unit, I mean, do you care? I don't know. So I guess we will find out. I mean, certainly it's one more thing to think about, and definitely you want to make sure that you're reporting things appropriately and bringing in the CFO and the finance team, in addition to all the other folks you're already bringing
Mm-hmm.
in for any one of these
Well, and it's
situations.
always one of those things about at what point does that breach reach reporting land,
Right.
whatever your regulated industry is. I mean, there are a lot of people in the healthcare space that were concerned and that are concerned. Will these ransomware gangs, will these cyber criminal gangs now start filing HHS notifications against us, right? Like if like are they going to reach out to and claim HIPAA violations or something like that, knowing that they are the actual cause of it themselves.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean the reality is that the HHS may find out independent of whether they file
Mhm.
something. And the healthcare industry in particular has been, I would say, very poor at worrying about cyber hygiene and protecting their environment and their patient data and all those sorts of things. Um, the irony to me, though, is, in healthcare specifically, is the focus is on the data and not on life
Mhm.
safety. I mean, what happens when what happens when your machine used for surgery goes
Oh,
down
well, we've seen
in the
it.
middle
There've
of
been
surgery?
we've been tracking that because we do a lot in the healthcare space, and there's
Yeah,
3 known deaths that have been caused by ransomware directly, and there's
yeah,
many more that are just incidental. But there's current ongoing attacks right now over in Texas and Oklahoma where emergency services people have to be steered away, and when every
right,
minute counts, that's really potentially catastrophic.
for sure,
You know.
right, yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, I would imagine there's order of magnitude more deaths due to cyber attacks that is the data where the data is not clear,
Correct.
or it was a key
I would
contributor.
completely agree. So now let's
Yeah.
segue into the most important part of our
Okay.
discussion, because
More
the
important than
more important
life.
than life and death is how when so 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 let's tee this up in the sense, what is the uh, struggle that cybersecurity industry leaders have had overall in communicating via metrics to stakeholders? to business owners in the medium space, owners in the small space, and then boards, etc., in the larger space.
Well, I mean, why doesn't this work? Hey, CEO, we have a high problem. We need $1 million to solve
Mhm.
it. And how come the CEO didn't just write me a
Right.
check?
That's what we hear all the time.
So
And yet you're like, did you educate them? Did you speak in their language? Right. Or did you throw a bunch of like sim reports at them or something? Right. Like it's not going to matter to them.
the concept of low, medium, and high, if it's not defined, is really bad. I mean, and if you think about like any other department, the sales department's going to say, "Hey, we're going to miss our sales target by $10 million if you don't invest in a new XYZ
Right.
system or hire 5 more salespeople," right? And so there's a dollar, and then there's a business
Right.
ask. The finance team is going to say, hey, if we don't upgrade these things, we're going to fail our SEC reporting requirements, and that's going to cost us a $2 million fine, right? So there's metrics in every other department. HR is going to say, hey, if we don't spend money on X, we're not going to hit our recruitment goals, and then your business plan is not going to be met, right? So every department can have a metric, and yet in cybersecurity we say, oh, this is a high
Right.
risk.
High,
Well, I
medium,
mean, why,
low.
why do we expect better
Right.
results? So what we do with our clients, and what I encourage others in the industry, is to adopt risk quantification. And people are very scared because, like, well, it's not accurate. What if I'm not right? And the point is, you just have to beat the term medium, right? You don't have to be right. You just have to be
Well, and
directionally
let's be
correct.
honest, sales is not right on their forecasts anyway, right? So,
Well,
but they
the
still
point is,
have
is
an
they have
estimate.
a
They still have a
plan.
plan
They
and
they
an
have an
estimate,
estimate
right?
for sure.
But every sales organization is off to some degree in their forecasting, but they're still forecasting because they still need to know that.
For sure. And then, so why can't we say, instead of a medium risk, say there's a 10% chance of $1 million loss
Mhm.
if we don't do this? And then, someone's going to say, well, it's not going to be $1 million loss. It's going to be a $500,000 loss or a $2 million. Cool. That's the right kind of discussion to
Mhm.
have, right? So now you're in a business discussion instead of, oh, it's medium.
Right.
And so now you're talking about, it's not 10%, it's 15%, it's 5. Cool. Like, you don't have to be right. You just have to bring this up so you can have a discussion. Well, why do you think it's 10%? Well, I looked at the peers in our industry, and of the 30 of them, 3 of them have had this problem, and they had similar controls to
Mhm.
us. Cool. That seems like a reasonable, estimate. Or look in the news. We saw this happening like 3 times in the past month. Our controls are no better than theirs. Why isn't, maybe it should be a 20% chance. But the point is that without using business language, you should not expect better results from business people, because you cannot expect the CEO to understand all the nuances of, look at all these high
Right.
CVEs. Well, the CEO is going to say, well, what's the bad business outcome? I don't know. Um, you know, you need to say, this system has all of our customer data. It has X million records, and if we're going to be, we could be fined, bad reputation, all these things. We estimate this system's worth $10 million, right? And the CEO says, oh yeah, I see. Yeah, we probably should invest $250,000 to help protect that better. That makes perfect
Right.
sense. And then if they don't do it, you still won, because you gave a mature risk discussion, and now you have an action, and you understand the risk tolerance of senior
Right.
management. So it's a win either way. Now some of the that may be a frustrating win, but at least you got an
Well, I
answer.
also see it almost as an affirmative defense. Open communication as affirmative defense. Should there be an event, right? Should there
For
be a
sure.
breach? You can be like, I kind of explained this, and that's why we needed
Right.
these other security layers in place, right?
For sure. Here are my board
Right.
slides. I said this could happen.
Yeah. I mean, not that that does you any
Yep.
good, but it does do you more good than why were we breached? Oh, we didn't tell you. You should have invested more to do something. So it that bears a obvious question, and that is how. How does an
Sure.
organization quantify risk? Like, what are some samples? Walk us through something.
It's yeah, it's by the way, it is not easy. So, if anyone thinks, oh, this, I'm just going to switch over, it's not easy. I mean, there's a whole system of rating CVs with, a numeric score that may or may not correlate to risk. There's the whole concept of high, medium, low. You look at what NIST puts out. I mean, there's a whole infrastructure around this. So, thinking you're going to just make a change like that is unrealistic. But here are some tools. So the first is How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. It's a book by Doug Hubbard and Richard Searson, and it is excellent at explaining the business case and then also walking you through how you do it.
Who is
And
the book
you
by?
can
It was
start.
Doug Hubbard.
It's by Doug Hubbard and Richard
Richard
Searson.
Searson.
So Richard Searson is a multi-time
Yep.
CISO. Doug Hubbard is like the
Hmm.
guy in quantification, and I guess like a lot of actuaries listen to him. He's just
Yep.
super, yeah. So, and what the point of the book, and it has a lot of details on how to do it, but the point of the book is all you have to do is be better than medium. As long as you can beat medium, you're winning because you're switching a let's say a magical discussion to a business
Right.
discussion, right? You're using a ill-defined term to a well-defined term. And by the way, if your organization says, well, we have to, we're required to use high, medium, low, etc. Cool. How about this? Define what low means. Low means below 1%. Let's say on
Hmm.
probability below 1%. Medium means above 1%, below 10%. High means whatever. Critical means some other percentage. And you get to define, and you say, here's my definition for these terms. And so, even if you're forced to use that, you can define it, and that's still going to put you in a better business discussion. Same thing for dollars. You're a very large multinational corporation, right? A high might be over $1 billion,
Right.
but if you're a medium-sized company, high might be $500,000.
Yep.
So that's a great book. The other book, and the book is by Jack Frund and Jack Jones, and it is the FAIR book, but the book's name itself eludes me
It's
at the
okay.
moment. But it's also a great book. The FAIR methodology is I would say, more rigorous methodology than how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk. But with the more rigor comes more difficulty in implementation.
Mm.
So how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk, you can literally start with an Excel spreadsheet and doing Monte Carlo simulations. But with FAIR, you need fairly big model. So if you're a large enterprise, I think FAIR might make perfect sense. But if you're a mid-sized company, the learnings from the book I think are very good. We actually take some of the elements of FAIR and use it in our methodology, but adopting the whole thing I think would be very difficult for most medium-sized
Right.
companies.
Are the benefits to a mid-sized, medium business are
Yeah.
what by having this quantified?
Yeah, so let's just imagine you have a punch list of 10 things that need to be
Hmm.
fixed from top to bottom. Okay, and so number one is turn on multi-factor, and number two, some other control, maybe more rigorous cybersecurity training is
Right.
number two. But when you do risk quantification, you're going to tie, those are the controls, so it's kind of backwards, but you're going to tie the vulnerability or the issue to dollars. So whatever your first issue is, let's say it's uncontrolled access to your some important system, it's going to say, okay, the expected loss on this is $400,000. And then the second one, which would also be high, your expected loss is going to be $150,000. And the third one, your expected loss is going to be $50,000. Well, if you saw, let's imagine high is 50,000 and above. So you have three highs on your list, okay? But one is worth 9 times the value of number one is worth 9 times the value of number
Mhm.
three. So your decision-making process is going to be very different when you see that. You're like, wow, I can reduce almost $500,000 in risk by, I said 400,000, so 8 times. I can reduce $400,000 in risk by just fixing this first item, or
Right.
just mitigating this first item. So it's going to really force a much bigger discipline. It's also going to allow for, okay, we need to invest in this new system. This new system is, a few $1,000s, cool, whatever, that's fine. This new system is going to be $50,000. Well, what's my return on investment? Now, if it's a expected loss of $500,000, okay, yeah, that makes sense. If it's expected loss of $100,000, maybe that doesn't make
Right.
sense, right? So, so maybe that's not the way to mitigate. Maybe we mitigate some other way, but it's going to allow for you to make way more mature business decisions. And the point is, as long as you're directionally correct, this is not like you're not doing high finance here. You're not reporting these numbers to your auditor. What you're doing is using these numbers to give you a directional a direction and point you in the right way and allow you to make more mature business decisions. So, from that perspective, you don't need the rigor on the finance side that you would need if you were if you were actually calculating your revenue or your profit or
No,
whatever,
that's really
right? I
good.
mean, this
So
is
so they can make better decisions, just like they can when they're making investment decisions pertaining to future sales revenue, right? Like, I mean, yeah, they might miss the forecast, but we knew generally what we were going to look like in a certain quarter or fiscal year, right?
for
Yeah,
sure.
and then it also is a good opener for discussion, right? Because yeah, like you pointed out, they might say, "Well, no, it's not going to be a $500,000 loss on average based on our size organization." You can search now. There's a lot of data points of what they paid out from from similar incidents, and then you can be like, "Okay, maybe it's a $200,000 or $150,000." Okay, well, but now you're having that discussion, right? And you're actually bringing those things, bubbling them to the top. It's much better than just inaction, because not having those discussions, that inaction is a decision, right? Not having the conversation is a decision. They are making a decision on their risk appetite, aren't they?
They are for
Yeah,
sure. And yeah, it's really illuminating because you can have a mature discussion with business folks that don't have a cybersecurity
right.
background.
Well, and that's the whole key. That's what's needed, right? Is to translate the technical jargon into what is the business impact? Is there an ROI generally for this initiative that you're driving?
And the answer, and sometimes you might find, I was pushing for this tool, but it turns out the business case actually isn't there. So probably better that we spend our time elsewhere
Right.
because it might have been a flop, and probably would not have reflected well on me if I'd pushed for it and then it didn't work
Right.
out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really good. What are some of the controls that you're seeing medium as before we wrap up? And I want to ask you about what you have on the horizon
Yeah.
for you and your organization. But what are some of the controls that you're seeing small, mid-sized businesses struggle with the most? Is it ongoing user training? Is it implementing MFA? Is it having 24/7 eyes on glass for visibility? What is it? Or are you seeing any trends?
So
Is it just all over the
yeah, I
place?
mean, I think the biggest common theme isn't so much a control; it's the time the organization has to spend on cybersecurity. So, we can all agree. So, we're typically meeting with our clients on a weekly basis. We talk to them. The owner of something says, "Yeah, I'm going to do this. This is important. I got to close off. You know, every person in the company has access to this thing. I got to shut it down so it's only 5 people." Next week, okay, so did you do it? Oh, I got too
Right.
busy. Da 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 da. And so, a lot of the controls for medium sized business are kind of, I would say, more diligence. And the problem is that they're being pulled in many directions. There's a lot of business
Mhm.
needs, and to think that you're going to be able to clearly get all those things done, especially if it's not your primary job, is very difficult. So that's to me is the bandwidth piece is probably the biggest struggle, because most of the controls that we have our clients put in place are not technically challenging controls. Like turning on MFA just is not that challenging. Yeah, there's user
Mhm.
impact. Maybe you do SSO, so there's like one system where you log in the morning with, two factors, and then you're fine for the rest of the day. With, a lot of the other things, it might be a one-time thing, the training. So you take some training, no big deal. You push some things out to people's laptops, cool, it's there. Now it's doing the monitoring or whatever it is. Like, those things aren't usually the big challenge. The big challenge is the day-to-day stuff. Am I doing an internal audit periodically and looking like who has access to all these things? Am I checking to make sure that when that employee left the organization, they were actually offboarded? Am I actually looking at, we got an alert in the alerting system. Cool. Oh, we're doing monitoring. Well, except no one's looking at the alerts. So it's the bandwidth type things that are the biggest challenge. Now, in that case, we probably would recommend they use a SOC or an MSSP to do the 24/7 monitoring. But that's not the case with all our clients. Some of them just haven't signed up for that yet, or haven't been convinced that they need it. So it's those types of things that I think are probably most mid-sized companies' biggest challenges. Well, the first one is, do you have executive sponsorship?
Yeah.
And all our clients do, or they wouldn't be with us. So once you have executive sponsorship, then all of a sudden, even if they don't know anything about security, they're like, you're in charge of security, figure it out. And then things start happening. So executive sponsorship is probably one. Again, not our clients. That would be folks probably that are not signing up for cybersecurity solutions. But then the second is, what kind of bandwidth is allocated?
Right. So it's in the execution of the recommendations that are being made. Yeah.
Right.
I see that. Yeah, we see that all the time.
Security stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things that people struggle with is the difference between kind of regular IT support or operations in cybersecurity, because they kind of think, well, it's all technology, it's plugged into the wall, there's computers involved, it's basically all the same. And like, they might have monitoring, or they might have a smaller MSP doing monitoring of the servers, right, or the infrastructure, but they're monitoring for like whether it's online or offline, whether there's disk space, right? They're not monitoring whether a threat actor is inside moving laterally, right? That's where that SIM MDR type thing comes in, where then you have somebody actually looking for and doing threat hunting. Do you see having to kind of explain that to, especially in that SMB space?
I think the answer is it depends. A lot of times when folks are coming to us, it's very basic stuff that we're fixing for the first 18 months.
Absolutely.
So like, where do we go after month 18? And that's something we're trying to figure out, what is going to give our clients the biggest bang for the buck, because there's not infinite dollars obviously to spend. And how do you get them to the next level of maturity without breaking the bank or breaking the time?
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's excellent. So tell us, we can go, I could talk to you for hours, so I apologize. What, as we're coming up to the end here, what, share with everybody what's on the horizon for you, for Fractional CISO organization?
Yeah. So, well, I would say more of the same in some respects. So we're helping mid-sized technology companies solve their cybersecurity leadership problems. We only do one thing, and that's virtual CISO work. Like, all the other things we leave to our customers' existing partners or new partners that we might help bring in. But we really just do one thing. We're going to continue to do the one thing. The thing that we are actively exploring is how to use AI to better serve our customers. So we'll do a lot of, we create a lot of content on behalf of our customers. And if we could even create more and better and faster, that would be good. Now, to date, our experimentation has been, the results have not been there. So, for instance, we will do vendor write-ups for our customers. But the challenge is,
can you explain what that is? Like, what do you mean by vendor write-ups?
Yeah. So from a vendor management perspective, our clients might be looking to sign with a new vendor, or they have an existing vendor, but they just want to evaluate their security. And so we'll look at security documentation and then do an evaluation, say, hey, this looks good, or
Oh, okay.
you might want to ask for X, or So we've given some of the LLMs the vendor documentation, and the write-ups seem to, 90% of it's right and 10% of it is wrong, like totally made up.
It hallucinates, and then you're like, it's way off track.
So if we can use it to better serve our customers, and maybe now, instead of, we can give you a bunch of vendor writers, we can give you 2 times as many, or whatever, or they'll be faster, so we can imagine a better service for them. But right now, that's a challenge. So we're doing a lot of experimentation with different models. We're using AWS Bedrock. So that's AWS's AI tool, and you can use different models. So you could use Meta's Lambda, you could use Claude, that's Anthropic's Claude, and there's a bunch of different models that you can use. So we're kind of experimenting to see how that works. And the nice part is, just like with other AWS functions, AWS is not looking at your data, and that data is not sent back to the model providers. Right. So that sounded like a pitch of AWS, but I mean, that's what we're experimenting with to see if that works.
Interesting.
Yep.
Do you have any public speaking coming up?
Not that I know of. I'm actually not the best person to ask.
Okay, yeah.
I don't have anything in the next week or two, for sure, and probably not for the rest of the year. But so we had a pretty busy November speaking circuit. There was one conference, the Boston Cybersecurity Summit, that I was at, and we with another VCSO, we did a presentation at the beginning. It was awesome. There was like 600 plus people in the room.
That's great.
It was really cool. We actually were talking about quantitative cyber risks. So that was really fun. And talking to the board. Probably the answer is yes, but not that I know right now.
That's fantastic. Well, we will have links to Fractional CISO and to your LinkedIn, so people can follow you when you are doing it. You put out some fantastic content. So we wish you all the best. This will definitely not be our last conversation, my friend. So
cool.
We thank you so much for your time. And thanks everybody for listening. Well, that wraps this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our episode. The next one is coming right up. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast and downloading on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for watching.